Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. So, it's a Sunday afternoon. I was just kind of doing my thing on Facebook, looking at different posts and stuff on the Form 1 groups, and someone asked basically about mounts and threads and stuff. And, you know, I've talked about it a bit on the Patreon. We've gone over mounts and tubes and things, and I've made some older videos about tubes. But I haven't really ever kind of discussed, you know, what are threads and why we use them and how they really work. And it seems to be, especially for new people to Form 1 or just suppressors in general, okay? Especially if they don't have a machining background or maybe an automotive background or just kind of a building background in general, haven't really had to ever learn, you know, how two things can be conjoined together in a structurally sound way and be removable, and how the standards and call-outs and stuff work. So there's always seems to be a ton of confusion on, will this mount fit my tube? Will this tube fit my mount? I want to use this brake. Will it fit my mount? So I want to try to kind of clarify and teach you guys some things for those who don't already know. So basically we're going to start all the way at the very, very beginning here. And if this video isn't for you, I apologize. But, you know, maybe you'll still find something valuable in it regardless. I'm by no means a mechanical engineer, a master machinist, you know. So if I don't get something exactly right, don't shoot the messenger. I'm just trying to help you. Okay. One of the most practical and strong ways to conjoin two round objects made of metal or even plastics and some things and keep it so they can be removed is by a threaded joint. So what we have, you know, here for an example are just two, literally just pieces of pipe, okay? It can be no different than this old piece of pipe here, okay? And if we wanted to put two pieces together and make it so we could still take them apart, but have that be incredibly strong joint, we would do it by threading two pieces. So you have male threads and you have female threads. So female threads are on the inside, male threads are on the outside. And what's going to happen is we're basically going to cut a series of grooves, and when we thread something together, they mesh just like your fingers and become one and form a tight bond. Okay? Now, obviously, if this hole was too big, then this would just, you know, go inside and never engage those threads. Or if this was too small, same kind of deal. So there has to be some standards and some ways to kind of measure things. So every thread gets measured, or I guess or has a call out giving you two different values. Okay? So your common ones with Form 1, you're going to hear quite a bit, is ASR Bravo. Okay? And that is nothing more than a slang term that we will get into quite a bit more. But what that is, and how that is written, is 1.375 times 24. Okay? So we'll write that here on a piece of paper so you know what I'm talking about. 1.375 by 24. So that is one type of thread. You could have a different piece of pipe that is different size or uses a different thread, and it might be something else. You know, another common thread that you're going to see is 1.4375 by 20. you might see 14375 by 24. All three of these are going to be very common 1.5 OD tube diameter threads. So what does this mean here? Well, the first number is talking about the size of the hole, okay? The second number is talking about how many threads there are in an inch. So what does that mean? Well, as you can see right here, there's not an inch of threads. Yet we would still call this by how many threads, if we did say thread this for an inch of length, there would be in that inch of space. So this particular piece here is threaded 1.375 by 24. So what they're saying is if we had an inch length of thread here, there would be 24 crests of thread, and that is our pitch. Our diameter would be very close to 1.375. Now I say very close because the two things have to bind together. So one is going to have to be a little smaller, one's going to have to be a little bigger. Okay? The term for that is minor dimension and major dimension. And you have, it's different for internal versus major. There's actually calculators to calculate it. And basically what it means is, before I actually go and machine the threads in, first I'm going to cut just a certain dimension for the outer diameter, and then we cut the threads in, okay? So, here's where the confusion a lot of people get, because a lot of people will throw around terms like, oh, it's 24 TPI. Oh, that one's 20 TPI. That's only telling, you can see, part of the equation. You can have something that's 24 TPI, but if this number is different, they're not going to thread together. I can't thread together a 1.375 by 24 TPI part to a 1.4375 by 24 part because they're two different sizes. One's bigger and one's smaller. So you have to understand this kind of concept here to really grasp how this all works and where things kind of go. Obviously, you can't take a 1.5 OD tube and cut, say, a 1.625 by 28 thread. Okay? That would mean this would be bigger than the material you have. Same with, say you have a piece of pipe and the inner diameter is already wider than the thread you want to cut, well then it's not going to work. And that's been a common problem in Form 1, because if you want to use ASR Bravo threads, which are 1.375 by 24, you have to start off with a piece of pipe that has a small enough hole in it to cut that size of a hole. So common sizes that we have, at least in the 1.5 diameter, are typically your ASR tubes and your D-cell tubes. Now, this is an ASR tube. This is a common SDTAD tube. It's going to be hard to see, but those two openings are different sizes and they're different threads. So if we were to take our caliper here and measure this ASR tube opening, I'm getting roughly 1.13-ish. Where if we were going to measure this D-tube one, and this is a 20 TPI D-tube, we're at 1.3845. So if I take this Q Plan B, that is ASR Bravo, meaning it's 1375 by 24, and try to thread it in to my D tube, you can see it just falls through. However, if I try to install it on my proper ASR Bravo tube that's cut 137 by 24, it threads together just fine. So that's where things kind of start to, be kind of confusing, is threads and tubes and stuff. Here is an SDTA tube. This is a 16250D tube. This happens to also be threaded 24 TPI. However, it's a 1.502 by 24 TPI, meaning this inner hole is around 1.5 inches wide. So if I take another 24 TPI thing, like this 1375 by 24 mount, and try to put it in here, look at how much smaller they are. It won't work, yet they are both 24 TPI. Also, one thing you don't want to get confused on is a lot of pistol can sizes are a 1375 OD, meaning the outer diameter of the tube is 1375. And a lot of times when you look at those tubes, you'll see them referenced as 24 TPI or 28 TPI. Well, don't get confused, because it does say 1375 and think, okay, well, that must mean that the tube is 1375 by 24. That's not possible if the outer diameter is 1375. It would mean that the thread would have to be smaller than our outer diameter. So a lot of times I think those are threaded like 1259 by 24, something like that. So, my point is thread is a two-part equation. So then, speaking of tubes, how do you go from one to another? What values are there? Well, there's been a lot of different between Form 4 cans and Form 1 supplies out there. Over the years, there have been lots of different things available. Form 1 stuff has mainly always been something that is not a suppressor part that you are then modifying and repurposing into a suppressor part on a Form 1. So things haven't always been perfect. And one of the biggest sources for tubes back in the day was nothing more than an aluminum Maglite flashlight tube. You could take it apart, you could fill in the hole, and voila, put some freeze plugs or whatever in it, and you could build yourself a Form 1 suppressor. So when people started making just that same tube, just without all the flashlight components, they carried on that same thread in those same sizes. And that thread tended to be a 14375 by 20. Over time, people then started making nicer quality tubes, whether it be titanium or steel or whatever. The fact of the matter is they would be threaded the 14375 by 20 on both ends. And therefore, to get a mount, you would then have to buy a mount like this direct thread mount, which is 14375 by 20, and that's what would fit in. Okay? And both ends would be that way. Well, then you saw some of the same companies that were making the tube then make their own brands of mounts and brakes and stuff. An example would be SDTA or Solvent Traps Direct. Okay? They make their own mounts for their own tubes. Well, that's fine and all, but over time, people wanted to branch out and use other things. So then you saw those same brands start to make mounts that could utilize other brands of brakes and stuff. So, for instance, say you wanted to use Silencer Co's brakes. Say you wanted to use Q's brakes. Here we have a Q Cherry Bomb. We'll say we wanted to use it on our SDTA 14375 by 20 tube. Well, Q only sells their mount in this size, so those aren't going to work. So you had one of two options. And originally, at the beginning, you would see a company like SDTA, for example. And Griffin was actually the first that really kind of caught popularity. They would then make their own mount, threaded 14375 by 20 on the outside, but then make the inside fit whatever brand brake it is that they popularized the mount. So Griffin was the first. Now we see the Cherry Bomb brand of brake, and there's now lots of different ones like these from Liberty Precision, these from Dino Precision, these from Reardon, you know. And now you can take that 14375 by 20 tube and use it on a Form 4 brand, commercial branded mount by getting rid of their mount, buying their own, and voila, you could then use that tube. Well, then another kind of solution came along, and that was to make adapters. So some companies started making adapters. So you can see I've got, and I can't take it apart, it's welded in now internally, but this was a 14375 by 20 tube that is now fitted with an ASR adapter. And again, the term ASR Bravo means 1375 by 24. And we'll go more into that later. But what it does is it just adapts this thread to this thread. So now, where I couldn't use this Q Plan B before on it, I now can use the Form 4 Company Q Plan B on this tube. So that was another solution. Well, then over time, you know, no one really wants to have to buy multiple things, blah, blah, blah. You've now had some more advancements, more stuff available, and eventually some companies started buying bar stock, or tube stock, I should say, that has a smaller opening inside, and going and machining it and being able to then cut 1375 by 24 threads in it. Now, because the hole initially when they buy it is smaller and they have to go machine it, they machine as far down as they want, and they've now left you a ledge inside to kind of act as your blast chamber, to index, I should say, your blast chamber. And it also leaves that blast chamber area a little thicker. Now the tube's going to be a little heavier, but you at least have a starting spot. Now there's a lot of confusion here because they get advertised as, like, for instance, having a built-in 2-inch BC. Okay, well, that doesn't mean your actual blast chamber, when you go and build this can, is going to be 2 inches. And that's where people start to get screwed up here. Because how they measure that is they're measuring from the end of the can here to where the shelf is. So basically where they stopped machining into the tube. So they take a boring bar or whatever, and they machine away the inside of the tube to a certain point, and then they stop, and it leaves a nice little shelf for y'all. Okay, actually, I can even show it to you if you're not familiar. It's probably going to be a little bit hard to see, but you can see that edge there, and that is a shelf into that tube, okay? So they machine this end to whatever size they need to then cut this thread, machine this end, or they buy it already with this size and then enlarge it on this end with whatever size cone they want to run. Typically a 1.360 inner diameter, or what's become popular as well is a 1.375 inner diameter. So now we have this shelf, and instead of trying to get confusing, they measure it in a very easy way. Well, where does the shelf fall inside the tube? Well, a lot of times they'll put, okay, it's 2.2 inches or 2.15 or 2.0 or whatever. And that means that from the edge, 2 inches in is where your shelf starts. So then they'll call that, okay, well, this tube has a 2-inch BC. Well, that is not correct. Because, why? Because you're going to be using a mount. And this mount takes up volume, see? And it's going to occupy some of that area. And now you no longer have that volume. So in reality, what was this 2-inch BC is now smaller. It's now more like 1.6. Then you go and try to use a long break or something and a tall cone, and now you've got some issues. So pretty much any kit out there that comes with an ASR tube and a bunch of cones stacked in it, I would definitely recommend, if you are going to Form 1 it, figuring out the math and increasing your blast chamber. You want to learn more about that stuff, sign up for the Patreon. We learn and talk all kinds of builds and stuff. So we'll get you all those specs for you. But yeah. So that being said, you know, the ASR tube, one piece, they're usually a little more expensive. They're more work. Usually the materials that they have to start off with are a bit more expensive and a little bit harder to get sometimes. And that is why. Keep in mind, they're also a bit heavier. And if you did want to use, say, this tube and you needed to make a smaller blast chamber for like 9mm or something, well, you're screwed because you've got that shelf there. So that's another kind of downfall. I'd really like to see ASR tubes start to be made with only like the shelf at like a 1/2 inch or something in. Then, you know, you could use the tube for literally anything, and you can pick exactly what spacer you want to put in it and really customize whatever. But that's me. You know, a lot of people don't really even get that kind of stuff. Okay, so that's ASR tubes. Now, there's also a size that floats around, and it's 14375 by 24. You'll see this with SPC, the brand SPC, Super Precision Concepts. And you'll see it from the defunct brand Diversified Machine. Okay, they both use, and actually I think Maverick uses some end caps in that size, but I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. I don't really own anything Maverick and never really have. But this is a DM, an old DM tube, and more or less, you know, the hole here or the call out here is exactly the same. But what some manufacturers did over time, they went away from this 14375 by 20, and this was before the ASR stuff was available. And they wanted a little more thread engagement. And some of them also, of course, wanted to make it where you had to buy from them, the other stuff. So we see this 14375 size by 24 come out in a few tubes. So all that means is instead of 20 threads in an inch, we now have 24 threads in an inch. And that gives a little bit stronger of a joint here. You know, back in the day, some people did have problems losing end caps and mounts and stuff. But you also have to remember that back when they were using this, it was mainly on aluminum tubes. And a lot of those aluminum tubes were of material that wasn't very something you'd want to use building a suppressor. They'd be using 6061 or worse, usually tempered aluminum, not something like 775 or 70. What's 10 I forget what 10 7068. I don't know. Whatever. Doesn't really matter because we've now since moved into ties and steels and stuff. So, but that being said, the size still floats around. Now with SPC, you're usually only going to see it on their 1375 inner diameter tubes. So they're going to have their ASR tubes, and then they're going to market their D tube, which is a 14375 by 24. And I've also been on their website and seen that they do now also sell this size too. So that gets me into kind of one thing here, and it's you can turn any tube into any mount you want, but it might or might not add length, and there might or might not be a mount available to do it. So before you buy anything, you need to have a good idea of what mounting system you want to run, with what brake you want to run, and therefore know what size tube you want to run, and then find a tube that you can accomplish all those things. If you want to do, if you do want to buy a 14375 by 20 tube, know that you're going to probably have an extra 0.8 inch if you are planning to convert it over to an ASR thread. Okay, so you're going to need to take that length into account, and that's, if you can't, say, find an ASR tube where the price on the ASR tube is more expensive or something. So, okay, so now let's get into mounts a little bit and ASR Bravo in general. So this is where people really start to get confused as well, because they'll hear the term ASR. ASR is a very prominent, one of the first most popular quick disconnect style mounting systems that the commercial Form 4 market ever put out, and it gained huge popularity and became a very much so household name in suppressor land. Over time, it only made sense then for all these other suppressor manufacturers to try to market their cans to be able to fit on the same stuff that a lot of people already own, as well as give people who, say, have used ASR Bravo pattern stuff and no longer wish to use it an alternative. So every kind of manufacturer out there tends to come up with their own QD system. I wish I had more to show you. I don't, because I don't have a reason to own more than one. Most people will pick one system, and it's an important decision to make, and then stick with it, because it's quite an investment, especially if you have a lot of firearms. So you might have the Dead Air Chemo, you might have Plan B, you might have Griffin set up the Plan A. Of course, you might have Silencer Co set up. What else? Regardless, it's becoming an industry standard now to make them all, whatever mount it is, be able to be compatible across each other. So you can buy now a Dead Air tube and use an ASR Silencer Co mount on it. You can buy a Silencer Co Omega 36M and use a Q Plan B on it. You can buy a Dead Air can and use a Griffin Plan A on it, because they're all threaded 1375 by 24, and now that's why we're seeing that size trickle down into the Form 4 market, because a lot of people want to be able to use the same stuff they're using on their Form 4 cans. So, because that ASR system was kind of one of the first and one of the most popular, everyone else adopted that thread, and therefore that 1375 by 24 thread gets slang termed and called the ASR Bravo thread. There's actually more than one ASR thread, by the way, too. There's ASR Alpha, there's ASR Charlie, but those two aren't nearly as popular, nor really anything you really need to worry about at this point. ASR Bravo has pretty much become the standard. So when someone says, hey, I'm looking for a mount that's ASR Bravo, they're not saying that you're going to want to use ASR Silencer Co brakes and stuff necessarily. They're just looking for any mount that is that size. So when you go and see a bunch of mounts listed, like let's say you see this one and this one listed online, well, darn, they look identical. But this one says ASR Bravo and this one says D-Cell. Well, now you know that this D-Cell one is more than likely 14375 by 20, because that's popular D-Cell size. And this one is ASR Bravo 1375 by 24. I know it's confusing, especially if you haven't dealt with it before. there are just a lot of options and stuff, and it does get gets confusing. So one more thing I want to touch on is, of course, every brand of mount has its own pattern style of brake. So you can't use a Silencer Co. brake on a Q Plan B. Even though this Q Plan B, when you go look it up, says ASR Bravo, all that means, again, is that it's ASR Bravo outer threads, that it fits an ASR Bravo tube. And yeah. Okay, so I'm not 100% sure where to go from here. Oh, there is one thing I did not mention, is now that we have these ASR tubes in our Form 1 world, yeah, like this one here. Now the one end, might be that ASR Bravo 1375/24. However, your end cap end is usually going to be a different size. And why is that? Well, you can't take something that's 1.355 inches wide and stick it through a hole that's only 1.313 like we measured earlier. So they're going to have to make one end larger. And that's where we get that 1360 or 1375 inner diameter tube, at least in the 1.5 stuff. So because they've made it larger, they might as well go with a size that is kind of already popular. So a lot of times they're going to go with a D-cell size, and most times they're going to go with 14375/20. Not always. You might also see 14375/24, or you might even see a proprietary, depending on the brand and who it is. That is what it is. I do also want to say real quick that there are still, even in the Form 1 world, some kits and stuff that do just use their own unique pattern stuff. Shield, when they first came out with their really lame excuse for a kit, put a proprietary sized end cap on it. Quiet Bore and their new 30 cal kits, and actually all their stuff, they tend to use their own thread sizes for things. So I want to say there's even a few others, but all the info is there. When you look at someone's website, it's there. It's just worded weird, and you got to kind of know what those words mean and stuff. So, all right, I'm going to wrap this one up. If you want some more details and stuff, you can always ask me. But hopefully this clears some things up for you guys. I know this video's gotten a little bit long, but have fun. Pick your tube, pick your mount, get your internal picks. Make sure you get your Form 1 done, and build your can and enjoy it. We'll see you guys for the next one.